Welcome to the Spring 2022 meeting of Uplift Education's Local Safety and Security Committee meeting. My name is Richard Crayford, and I am the board chair at Uplift Education. And I'm excited to have a great collection of minds, as I see here, together to address such significant issues as safety and security. Obviously, the times we live in today, it's even more important. The time is now 9:03 a.m. and I call this meeting to order. I'd love to have everybody introduce themselves, and I guess we'll just start with you.
I'm Officer Robert Reeves with the Irving Police Department. I oversee the officers that work at North Hills and Uplift, and shoot, I think I've been working with Uplift for about 18 years now, so I guess I'm turning into an old salty dog.
Long time amazing partner with us.
Good morning, my name is Amy Cannon. I am the Senior Director of Wellbeing and Health Services, predominantly overseeing the Health Services Department.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Burke. I'm the Chief Legal Officer here at Uplift.
Good morning, I'm Alan Tollison, Regional Director of Operations and Emergency Preparedness and Coordinator for the campus.
I'm Julie Davis, and I'm Director of Risk Management.
I'm Shanti Cole, and I'm the Director of Counseling and Prevention Services. I oversee all of our social behavioral counselors and prevention specialists.
Good morning, I'm Maritza Vasquez, and I'm the Operations Director at Uplift Grant, and I'm also an Uplift Grant parent.
Great.
Good morning, I'm Derek Ward. I'm the Senior Director of Legal Affairs.
Okay.
Good morning, Nelson Foxy, CEO of Uplift.
Great. I'm going to, with that, thank you everybody for the introduction, and with that I'll hand it over to Alex Burke, who's our Chief Legal Officer, who will manage today's meeting.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. So what we have up on the screen is our agenda for this morning. As you can tell, it's a smaller group this morning, so we have this morning, and I think we'll take kind of a more lighter, informal approach. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. If it turns to be more conversational, that is terrific. Go to the next slide. So I kind of wanted to briefly start us out with what the Local Safety Security Committee is, why it exists, why we are here. So the Local Safety and Security Committee, affectionately we call it the LSSC. It is a product of Senate Bill 11, which is from the 86th Texas Alleged Session, which was the session before last. And it was the result of just the tragic school shootings that we have seen nationwide as well as statewide. Not too far before the session met, we had the tragic shooting, school shooting at Santa Fe High School in Santa Fe, Texas. That obviously helped push Senate Bill 11 and the provisions within it. As you can see, it really focused on mental health provisions and safety protocols. Things like blood pathogen provisions, behavioral assessments, the Local Safety and Security Committee, and things like that. So what does the LSSC do? The idea here is to provide strategic recommendations to administration on how we can better effectuate our safety protocols network-wide. The idea is to get some recommendations on our emergency operations plan, but it's not necessarily limited to that. It can be on possibly like our COVID response, which I know Amy will speak to this morning, possibly our student support services response to emergencies. It's just, the idea here is to take in input, thoughts, reflections, recommendations from our community and our stakeholders on how we can implement best practices network-wide. And of course, obviously, consulting with law enforcement on it as well. So, at the heart of this is, again, we want best practices. Obviously, our main priority is the safety and security of scholars and staff here at Uplift. If you have any questions, thoughts, reflections this morning, please don't hesitate to throw them out. And we certainly love to have those and have them to process and implement. So with that, we will turn it over to Alan Tollison, one of our regional directors of operation, and Julie Davis, our director of risk management.
Thanks, Alex. Again, just want to really let you guys know how much we appreciate y'all being here. That time and time again, we see that, that partnership between stakeholders, folks from different fields, from different perspectives in the communities where we have our campuses is really such a big factor in keeping everybody safe. So just, again, thanks so much for your time and for being here with us today. So quickly, I'll give a overview of how we do things, just from a kind of high-level view with safety. Some of you are probably very familiar with this, but just to kind of level set so everybody's aware. So we have our emergency operations plans for each campus. We do have a network plan that Ms. Julie Davis has been kind of instrumental in partnering with myself and some other leaders at CMO to kind of craft for the network. And we also have site-specific campus plans for each site with there's maps, unique crisis response teams for that campus, and those types of things with the more specific detail. We do have facilities, security, and access control measures. As we've built our campuses over the years, we include our electronic locking doors, vestibules, so any entrance would have where the receptionist would reside, you'd have like exterior door and then another layer of doors to kind of create that buffer in that lobby. And then security cameras throughout our campuses. One piece I'm particularly just excited about would be Ms. Shantique Cole's world. Just the social counselors we have at Uplift is such a kind of a point of pride because we have dedicated social counselors, right? So they're not getting pulled for schedule making, they're not getting pulled to cover classes, they're truly there for the well-being of kids, and that's what they're doing in and out every day. So, and that becomes such a valuable partnership for campus leaders and for just getting ahead of threats and those types of things. Of course, we do our ongoing safety drills. We'll look at that a little more closely here in a moment. We conduct safety and facilities audits. We do our own internal assessments, but then we also participate in the kind of 3-year cycle formal audit where we pull in partners kind of from the Texas School Safety Center recommendations and have them do a deep audit for each of our campuses. And we completed that process May of last year, and I can share some of those findings toward the end of our time. Other pieces we've added over the last couple of years, just in line with guidance from that Texas School Safety Center, would be the run, hide, fight, that kind of options-based response to active shooter situations. Of course, we also do our kind of thorough lockdown training and practicing, knowing that that tends to be the safest option for securing classrooms and spaces on site. But then in those unique situations where unfortunately we know a lot of times those incidents start in a classroom or in a place where lockdown's not an option, making sure staff are aware of what their options are there. And then with that, we've also kind of built and fleshed out threat assessment and reporting through our safe and supportive school team requirements. We'll look at that a little more closely too. And that essentially is where if there's a threat, making sure the leaders on site can come together, quickly determine credibility of the threat. Is there access to weapons for that scholar? What's the plan for when they return back to school? If it's not they're kind of removed from the campus, being able to move through all of that in an effective way, and making sure campuses are able to do that. And then finally, a big part of it has been our police and community partnership. Car-line officers tend to be just such a critical part at our campuses from their morning and afternoon assistance there, not only with traffic control, they also become just these great thought partners for emergency situations.
We've lost our deck.
Oh, there we go, we're back.
All right.
Alrighty, so again, we updated some facilities pieces at our campuses based on some kind of requirements over the last few years. Again, just making sure our system's up to date. It's the same things I mentioned, the automatically locking doors and the vestibules and camera systems. Recent upgrades we've made really relate to training. With COVID, part of the kind of an impact we've seen was every attention so shifted to COVID preparedness that some of those practices I think schools had in place that were working for other types of safety kind of got put on the back burner while we were addressing the pandemic issues. And so retraining folks, getting back to making sure folks know what to do in these situations. That's been a big push this year, and we're starting to see some positive progress there. Also, we've been looking at cybersecurity, and we recently introduced multi-factor authentication for our systems. Of course, that means when staff are logging in, they may be asked they may receive a text to confirm that they also have their personal phone and their computer to just that identity check to make sure only people who should be on our systems are in there, since so much critical data and our camera accesses, card accesses all flow through those systems. Quick note on safety drills and threat response. So as you may be familiar, we're required with the state to do our lockdown drills each semester at all of our campuses, severe weather drills. We also do our monthly fire drills. Secure lockout's a practice we do as well. Secure lockout is also known as the yellow or soft lockdown. That would essentially be where class continues as normal. We just lock doors, so we're at the ready to go into a lockdown if needed. That's something you would do if there was a threat, not immediately on the property, but maybe in the area, and that's just another thing we practice at campuses as one of those prevention measures. And then we have our threat assessment teams again, also known as the Safe and Supportive Schools teams. Through their conversations and their weekly leadership meetings, they're able to discuss just really openly and honestly any threats or concerns to public safety. So if there's a concerning behavior noticed from a scholar, a parent, staff member, they can in that safe space talk about it, like, hey, what do we need to investigate here? What do we need to look at more deeply to kind of plan and see what next steps should be, or determine is it truly a threat? Is it how do we support the scholar who may be having these feelings and need this intervention, but then also addressing the public safety piece. Alrighty, and so a lot of y'all are familiar with our emergency operations plans. They're very kind of similar, network to network, campus to campus. But we'll touch on some of the new additions that over the last couple of years, especially this last year, they've really pressed schools to have. It's been an interesting process working with Julie. They're kind of not sure what to do with charter schools. So when we submit it, it's kind of like submitting our required documentation, but they're also like, we're excited to see what y'all do because, a charter network submitting this is super valuable for them to see and kind of look through and learn from as well. So they've been a great partner at Texas School Safety Center as we've done through that process. But the new additions have been, of course, threat assessment team information, communicable disease appendix that Amy kind of helped mastermind with her health services team, and she'll share a little more about. The active shooter response pieces, and then some reunification planning. So reunification planning gets into, if there were an incident, how do you physically safely and emotionally safely connect parents back to those scholars, and kind of knowing that if you had to do that, it's probably an awful day for everyone involved, but how do you make it move forward as smoothly as you can? And so we're looking at those plans and making those additions this year and into next year. Julie, anything else you wanted to add about the continuity of operations plans or other new additions for the emergency operations plan?
Yeah, the continuity of operations plan is just as to, for example, when we had COVID, how do we operate? How do we continue our operations? So we really, in real time, went through a discussion when it came to COVID. And as I was telling Amy earlier, I had to do a kind of a summary for one of our insurance reps. Literally less than 8 days, we had flipped to everyone being virtual. Went back to all of Yasmin's calls, and and it's kind of amazing how we forgot. But the continuum of operations is taking that, what we did in different circumstances, be COVID, be active shooter, be any kind of situation that we can talk about, and we run it through as a step-by-step program. So that when people do come to the campus, and I'm meaning, a new operations director or someone's changing roles, this is an actual document in a book that they can open and they can look through and get a sense of where we are as to this is how we're going to react to any circumstance. So that's been new. They're trying to succinct to make it because, ISDs have huge EOPs. and they have a tendency to collect dust. No one uses them. And so this is what SB 11, in the broader sense, is what they're trying to do, is to have school districts, have our networks, charter, open enrollment charter schools, everybody use this as a working document. And so there's going to be changes made depending on what exposures we are coming to. And so this is, I think, one of the best parts about the EOP is bringing in all these different departments. Because everyone, depending on where we're sitting in an active shooter, you're going to have transportation issues. You're going to have even possibly CNP or kitchen people that need to be involved for, during reunification. You're bringing the whole school together to work through a plan so everyone knows, it's kind of muscle memory, is everyone knows when this happens, this is what I'm responsible for. And so there's no chaos, it's calm, as best we can. So that's their newest thing. I'm working on it. Alan is working on it. We're trying to streamline so we have the best plan going forward.
Alan, if I can, I was just going to kind of touch on real kind of briefly the 2 points, the threat assessment team and then communications. Just to kind of dig a little on the threat assessment team. So there's 2 threat assessment teams. There's the school-based threat assessment team and then the network threat assessment team. And I mean, as you can imagine, those 2 work in tandem should situations present themselves. And typically how that plays out is if there is a report of a threat or something along those lines, obviously the first step is to call 911, and then the second step is to either call myself or text me. My sub is Alan, and then Shantique is on the call list as well. And then what I do is I get all the information I can that we know from the school, and then I send out what I call a triage test, and it includes all the relevant departments who need to be in play to help support the situation. So communications, obviously, Shantique's team, student support services, the counseling team, Alan and his colleagues, RDOs, so we can determine what kind of additional police support or some other security support is needed. And then we sort of off that triage text chain, we just add information as we learn it, and the chain goes through the sort of, I would just sort of say, end of the incidents. We'll close the chain out. I'll close the chain out, but of course, if any more information pops up, I just ask folks to add it to the chain. So that's kind of how we move through like sort of immediate communications between the school and CMO to help support them.
So I'm going to just like pause for a minute to say, so we had a real situation of this yesterday at Uplift Infinity.
I was going to talk about that as well.
Yeah, I actually thought it worked really well. So the nice thing about the text chain versus maybe more formal platform is it allows us all to be in real time getting updates. So our CMO team knows as soon as there's a situation on the campus, those of us on the text chain literally stop what we're doing and we engage on it. And even, I know Richard knows we've been focused on really communication out faster to parents because if kids are texting, we're like in a race of like who can get to parents faster. And yesterday, like while Alex was getting information, we just started drafting the communication. And as he filled in blanks, we could just make an edit, and we had a message out to parents within 30 minutes, like a pretty good, solid detail of what the situation was and that everyone was safe. And at least I didn't hear that there was a lot of parent noise on the campus at all. I see shaking his head, like, because we, while we were in parallel doing that, Alex was getting guidance about how to make sure the student was out of the classroom, their bag was separated from them, and then, like Alex said, he closed the text chain when the determination was made that it was not a terroristic threat and that there was no weapon on site, and the child had been escorted off campus. And so Alex was like, at this time, I'm closing this text chain, and we all knew that whatever follow-up steps were going to be handled, but we all didn't need to be like zoned in on it at that moment.
Yeah, it was really neat to see how the communication worked yesterday. with-
We're learning.
Yeah, we are. I mean, communication
You
is.
know, I will say that, I mean, I was so happy to hear that y'all called, right? Because we've come a long way from just trying to handle it on the campus, and we can take care of this, we don't need to involve the police, we want to handle any discipline that goes with the scholar, we don't want him to get in trouble. That scholar was actually 17.
Yeah.
So he's a full-blown adult as far as the criminal justice system in Texas is concerned, right? But one thing on the text chain, I'll just,
Yeah,
because
please.
we have these same concerns with officers and MDTs, is if you're using a work phone or if you're using a personal phone, be careful of what you're including in that text.
Yeah.
Is this another kid that's just acting stupid, or is this, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
when it all gets subpoenaed,
Yeah.
right, it's gonna be, everybody's gonna look like they got mud on their face if they were saying something inappropriate, right?
But it's a good reminder.
Yeah,
to
no, it's
the group.
correct.
Unfortunately, I've never seen anyone say anything inappropriate on it, but it's a good reminder
Yeah.
of don't. And we also
For
don't
sure.
use the scholar's name on the text chain either.
That's good too. You know, and debriefing it, because I did talk to Brent, we talked pretty extensively about it yesterday and different things. That would have fallen under what would have been like a secure, because we pretty much knew he was in a kid. So, you know, a lockdown wasn't needed because, like when we had the incident at MacArthur High School, that lockdown took 6 hours, right? Because the only way you lift a lockdown is by police going through every single door and letting each person out. And kids and teachers were literally using the restroom in their classrooms because you can't go to the hallway. You can't go to the bathroom during a lockdown. So Irving ISD learned some things as far as maybe we should have some basic toiletry items in our classrooms, because a big campus is going to take a long time to go through, right?
That's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
That's not what DPD did with Luna.
Yeah.
They did the opposite, and so it's interesting that the way the lockdown worked, where the kids stayed in the room,
Yeah,
but
'cause-
it took hours. Yeah.
Right, because that's the whole thing. And then I serve as the public information officer for the department, so I'm the guy that goes on TV and the media guy, right? And I have a really good working relationship with Irving ISD's PIO. And I would encourage for all the different campuses to have that, their person on their campus or someone in this room to have that relationship with the PIOs in those police departments, because if you're trying to put out information on Twitter or something like that, you don't want to have conflicting
Yep.
information.
Yeah.
Or saying, everything seems to be okay, we're going through it, but the police are saying, hey, it's a full lockdown, our SWAT team's been called out, because that's, obviously parents are getting mixed messaging.
Yeah.
And so her and I called each other, and she was like, okay, all we're going to be doing is retweeting whatever the PD puts out and just referencing that the PD is the main source to follow on this incident, as they are the ones that are in control of the lockdown. So there was a lot of good on-the-job training that came out of that. And you know, you talked about the reunification plans. The ISD had to have buses, so that's what we had to start doing. As we cleared rooms, those kids were escorted outside. They were put on a bus and they were transferred to one of a nearby, I think it was middle school or elementary school. And the police department put that messaging out: hey, parents, don't come to MacArthur High School, go to this campus. So as far as reunification, I don't know if that's a deal where, because buses were probably going to be needed, if there's a contract set up with a busing company or the school districts to possibly be able to, hey, can we get your help on this situation, because that's what's going to be needed. You know, North Hills will be the same way, or Infinity, and those are the two campuses I'm familiar with on their layout. But for Infinity, for sure, everybody's going to have to be pulled out of the buildings, right? And so depending on weather, whether or not they stay in the parking lot, or, you know, we clear the gym first and we pull them into the gym, or something along those lines. So it might be a good idea to maybe try to set up a contract with a busing system that can get there. You know, I know y'all use those big buses for like sporting events.
Yeah, I mean, since you're here, pick your brain.
Yes, ma'am.
That is something that I've looked into, and Durham would set up something like
Okay.
that. But then they may take longer depending on where, because we are spread through Tarrant and Dallas County. And so the Dallas County schools, I believe, and so, you know, how fast, because that's what we were talking about, is like, you know, usually it's,
30, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
They can have a bus
and
there about
so,
45 minutes,
okay.
maybe even an hour.
As long as I keep them in that kind of
I
time
think
range.
if you hear lockdown, then I would go ahead and start the bus process.
Okay,
Because it should go that way, I mean, per the instructions of how a lockdown works. You can't ever just come over and be like, okay, it's all, everything's fine, and we're ready to go, because that creates a bad muscle memory, that creates complacency with the actual alert, and then it loses its effectiveness of a lockdown, right? A
Okay.
lockdown is the full-blown thing. So like if you pull that whistle, it's kind of, don't pull that whistle unless you know it, but
Right.
don't hesitate to pull the whistle also, because you're afraid that,
I would
am
rather
I gonna
be
get
safe
griped
than
at
sorry.
because,
Yeah,
am
I
gonna
would
get
rather-
griped at,
yeah,
and
that's-
everybody's gonna be mad at me. And so, because there was that MacArthur High School incident, that should have been a secure, but the person that pulled the lockdown heard different information and called it, but wasn't even on campus, right? So they were at the district's headquarters and said, let's just put everybody in a lockdown. And so they called the lockdown, and that's what occurred, right? So there is some of that information communication process. As far as yesterday's deal at Infinity, that would have been a secure type situation, like I mentioned. My only concern with debriefing with Brent was Uplift staff going and getting the scholar out of the classroom. No one knew at that time if he had a weapon on his person or not. He sees someone come in the classroom, does a quick reach to the backpack, gets his weapon out, then what?
right.
Right, so it's definitely a 911 call. You know, we're going to instantly send at least 2 officers, but as officers hear that go out over the radio, more are going to respond to his school, knowing that it could escalate to something worse. You know, that's a kid situation where secure, everybody stays, business as usual. They may or may not think it's because of something they said, or they may not have any clue and they may think it's related to something else. But then when that door opens, it's 2 officers coming in who can at least address a threat if one presents itself. But it also, I think, goes into providing more like, we're not playing around. If you do this, the police are coming, and we're taking this very seriously because, you know, the last 10 years have shown that school shootings will and do occur all over the country.
Right.
So Officer Reeves, you literally then, so there's like, our staff can get a student separated from their classroom faster than officers coming onto campus. Would you then suggest at least an administrator goes to the classroom and it looks like they're doing an observation, they're just hanging out in the back of the room until the police arrive? Like,
That's
I'm
fine.
trying to
I think that'd be
navigate your
fine.
feedback a little bit of just like,
Yeah.
there could be a delay.
Right, so, you know, our average response time in Irving, and it's different
Sure.
everywhere, right? But our average response time is going to be 2 to 5 minutes on something like that.
Yeah,
So having, you know, you call secure, by definition of secure, it's, you know, no one comes in or out of any of the classrooms, right? But it is business as usual, and that clears out the hallway.
yeah.
Because, you know, as it goes, if you don't call secure and you're like, well, we're just gonna go get them, and okay, should we go get them now? Let's go get them now. And you're walking down the hallway and all of a sudden the bells go off, right?
Sure,
And then
of
everybody
course.
starts changing classes. And so I think that'd be fine, but at the same time, that is opening a door, which contradicts the whole secure process on keeping all the classrooms isolated and contained and locked so that nobody is going out in the hallways, right? And then, you know, but standing outside the hallway, but it's just, if you tip the person off, the scholar that may do something wrong, or a parent that's gone in and someone saw something, right? You could, you know, start a situation and not have any way to de-escalate it besides just words, right? And some people are really good at de-escalation, and, you know, younger, older officers, right?
Sure.
Younger officers are really bad at it. Older officers are really good because they don't want to get in the fight and get hurt, right? And so that's where that de-escalation techniques would come into if you walk in there and something cracked off. So that was my only thing, and I think, you know, yeah, I think there was 4 or 5 officers that showed up initially, and we all ride single-man cars, so that's 4 or 5 squad cars showing up on campus. So that is going to create a communication deal to send out to parents, because they'll find out like that.
Immediately, yeah.
And so, you know, and we deal with that as well. And you want to make sure that you're getting them information, but you want to make sure that you're also not giving them too much information too soon, type of deal. And then lo and behold, I think they had, someone hit their head or something, so the ambulance showed up, lights and sirens at the same time. And it was completely unrelated to the situation.
The usual
School
stuff.
So yeah, the ambulance comes in, but its lights going and everything like that for someone who was in I think the nurse's office or something that was completely unrelated. But everybody was concerned, so they're like, wow, no one's hurt, you know? But that's just how it always goes.
So, I guess when we call in 911, are we able to ask how far out the police are?
Yeah, and most likely the dispatcher will stay on the phone with you
Yeah.
to get any updates, to relay that to the officers. You know, we're not going to come lights and sirens unless an active threat is presenting itself.
Sure.
You know, we think there's a school, scholar made some posts on social media alluding to a threat or harassment to another scholar saying that, you know, he took pictures in front of her house and she was going to be attacked or someone was going to be attacked and using the racial slurs and everything. But he may or may not have a weapon on his person there. So we're coming. Just with that though, we're not going to run lights and sirens. And so, but we'll get there pretty quickly. And of course, it's different in every jurisdiction.
Does Irving PD have a mental health response team?
We do. So we were one of the police departments that was very early on that. Us and Fort Worth, I think, were kind of the first two in the Metroplex. And so we have, I think they're hiring another counselor, but we have 3 teams. So each team is 2 officers and a counselor.
Okay.
So we do have 3 teams in mental health response.
And so if we know the scholar may have a mental health diagnosis, should we request that when we call?
So your initial officer is going to be whoever's closest that gets the call, right? So in Irving, all of our officers have had some basic mental health response training. They used to send us training officers used to go to a 40-hour class and become certified as mental health peace officers. All of the mental health unit officers are that, but where they're at during the day or if they're on are, I think some of them work 10s, so you know they got at least 3 days off a week, and some of it's the weekend and a weekday. So it's just going to be called in and dispatched. Definitely, if you know the person has any mental health issues, relay that, and because that will help the officers. You know, if they know that and they get out there, it may help them identify if someone's stimming a lot quicker versus if they're thinking that they're just trying not to comply, right? So the more information you can provide to us, the better decisions that can be made in those snap judgment type of
Got it.
calls.
Thank you.
So that's a good one. Yeah, that's definitely one you want to provide, because I think that was a little bit of yesterday's, right? Does that student have, that scholar have a little possibility? So I think that was some concern that maybe they didn't understand the level of their threat, right? So, yeah, it comes with the PDs, your PIOs of those departments.
Yeah, I made a note here, that's right, yeah, that's.
You're lucky, I mean, I'm that same guy, so you had it for the Irving campuses, but definitely. And, you know, I sit on the board also for the North Texas PIO, so if you need a contact somewhere, just, I can get you in contact with the PIO.
Yeah.
That's something we're finding too, a surprise benefit of the car line situations in the different cities is a lot of times a coordinating officer who's plugged into a lot of different aspects of the community policing in the area. They just become these great thought partners and resource connections.
And that was you just reminded me of access cards to get in the doors for those officers that work at the schools, right? Because if they're directing traffic and something goes off inside, North Hills and Infinity, we've done that, right? We've made sure that the officers, and we've had, I think that last issue that happened last summer where all the cards got messed up or the gates weren't working. So we're in that process of trying to get it redone.
Our new system,
we're in that process.
We have a
of
new
trying to get it
system.
redone. But having those cards, especially for the officers that work, you know, because a lot of guys work the same schedule. You know, they have like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so they're out there. Because if something goes on inside and they need to get inside, they're locked out as well without having a tool or breaking a window or something on those lines, so.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I really appreciate we may follow up with you on the COVID information officers. That'd be super helpful.
Okay, well, Ms. Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, you want to-
COVID health services updates.
Health services.
Sure. So we'll start with the COVID-19 response this year. The health service team is comprised of 10 RNs, 18 LVNs, 17 unlicensed health professionals. In 2020, we implemented Luminaire, which is a quick screen tool for COVID-19. Of course, for this upcoming school year, we'll reevaluate if we still are needing a COVID-19 quick screen, or if we will repurpose it for some other use for the upcoming school year. The tool was provided as part of the COVID-19 screen to basically help parents as well as staff determine whether or not they need to get a test, if their symptoms are potentially COVID related, as well as allow us the opportunity to track whether or not individuals were vaccinated. The unique thing that we did, we had the nurse supervisors would start their day every morning at 5 a.m. And so as employees screened red, they had an opportunity to speak with a registered nurse prior to coming to school. And so a lot of our positive cases were caught that way. This school year, we've had a total of 2,554 positive cases. 1,806 of them were scholars. Not all of them were on the campus. Some of them were caught during maybe the break, or perhaps they were already out on quarantine and then tested positive as a result of being in close contact to someone. In addition, we provided PCR and rapid antigen tests Monday through Friday. The testing was available and still is to all scholars and staff in the clinics. All health service personnel took the Johns Hopkins University contact tracing course that was offered. And so as a result, of course, we contact trace the majority of our cases. We also partnered with Collins Medical Wellness Group, as well as Albertsons and Tom Thumb, and we offered COVID-19 vaccines throughout the entire community. This school year alone, over 4,000 people took advantage of this opportunity. On the campuses, each nurse worked with the ops director as well as the campus leadership team and facilities and set up a text blast, whether it was through GroupMe or the general texting system. And it allowed them, whenever a scholar was ill during the school day or tested positive, then the nurse would send out a message to them, and it was a basic code 19 scholar, code 19 staff, and it allowed them to go in, remove those scholars, deep clean the classroom, and then allow them to come back in so that we could minimize any potential spread. Next slide, please. Oh my, that's small. So it looks big, but it's small. As the health professionals on campus, it's imperative, of course, that the health service team be prepared to respond to all situations until EMS arrives, and then, of course, the care is transferred. So part of the prevention measure, the nurses participate with ongoing assessment threats, and they're a part of the school health and response team. The preparedness, of course, the staff, they receive training every single year. Majority of our nurse supervisors are CPR certified instructors. And this year, this summer, we are also having them to go through a trauma response course that is specific to the actual registered nurse that will oversee clusters of the campuses throughout the network. The response, of course, we work very closely with the ops directors on campus. This year, we do not have any scholars on the ventilator, but in the previous years, we would have scholars on the ventilators in school. We do also have scholars who have oxygen on campus and some who are in wheelchairs, so it's really important that even though there's a potential threat or an emergency, that we do our due diligence to safeguard those scholars and ensure their safety until they can exit the building. And then, of course, the recovery, we do participate in the evaluation and the revisions of any emergency school plans.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy. And up next, we have Shanti Cole, who is our Director of Counseling Services.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, so we actually follow a school-based mental health program that aligns with both TEA, the Texas Education Administration, and ASCA. And so in that, we have 46 licensed clinical professionals, and so those all include licensed professional counselors, and also licensed clinical social workers. And so throughout this program, we are able to provide direct therapeutic services. We consider this short-term services, solutions-focused. And so what that means is we will normally see a scholar for any particular reason for only about 8 sessions, unless there are some what we call one-off situations that we may potentially see them more, but we connect them with outside services for ongoing continuity of care. And so we provide psychoeducational programming in the classroom, so we push in and do what we call prevention and also promotion work in order to hopefully prevent things like bullying, cyberbullying, even suicide ideation, and things like also teen dating violence and things like that. We have programming on all of those things. And so we also do suicide assessments, self-injury assessments, and threat of violence assessments. The threat of violence assessments are normally more in the moment when that scholar is actually in the room, maybe for another reason, and then they may say something about a threat, and then we'll go through with a threat of violence assessment and then pass that information on to our admin and our ODs, who then take that information and use it in investigations of any of those situations. We help with assessing and reporting any of the threats as well, or any violations of the scholar conduct code. And then we also provide family therapy services to all of our parents our families, that qualify for that particular program as ongoing services. We also work very closely with our SEL team, social emotional learning team, who are in the classroom providing social emotional learning content in every advisory class and multiple times a week. So it's not every single day, but multiple times a week in those classes. We also provide annual trainings to all of our staff every year on the topics that are listed there. And then in addition, we are the ones who deploy and oversee our crisis response situation. So meaning after the crisis has kind of wrapped up, we are there for support on the campuses and kind of hitting the ground running to make sure that scholars feel safe, that they have somewhere to process, a licensed clinical professional that's there to process that with them. We do this with staff as well. We do both in-person and virtual responses depending on the situation. And we are normally there the day after the crisis situation happened and up to as long as needed afterwards.
That's great. So on the teen dating violence, y'all are actually talking to students about that part of that.
Correct.
That's good.
Yeah, we have a whole
that just got added
program.
to the deal there because of the Grand Prairie incident last year, last legislation, right? So that's a big issue.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we have a whole program that we push into classrooms for that, and we work with a partner called One Love. So they're a national partner that creates content for that.
So yeah, we do so I like to hear that y'all are doing the debriefing, because we also do the peer, we have our peer support system, which is, we started, and now we're pushing that over to the fire department, right? But any incident we're involved in, we have to go and talk about, which is, I'm so thankful that the stigma with mental health has changed, because in my little over 19 years of being a police officer, when I first got hired on, it was check your personal business when you come to work, deal with it. If you say anything, you'll never get a transfer, which is why 3 times as many of us commit suicide to actually get killed in line of duty every year, right? It's like 100 compared to 300. So, and we've met that at Irving. We've had 3 line of duty deaths, and we've had 9 officers commit suicide. So finally, after the most recent one that was about 5 years ago, it started changing in our department and nationally, and mental health. That's really great that y'all are doing that, because that's why we started our mental health unit, because that has helped reduce a lot of our calls for service, because they follow up with them when they're not in their crisis, and they actually make sure they can do the doctor, the medicine, everything along those lines. So that's a good ahead of the curve.
Thank you.
What you're doing there.
Yeah, all of our counselors, of course, help with the reentry meetings as well, and they do that follow-up care to make sure that in school they're still feeling safe. We create a safety plan when they return, and then, of course, make sure they're connected with outside providers. And then, like you said, we debrief on the campus, so we're there for the campus support, but then we also debrief as a team after the fact, so the counseling team, to make sure that our counselors are also well, because we're the ones that, we're there in the face of the crisis, but we gotta protect ourselves as well.
And that's with
So-
every employee from the cleaning staff all the way to the ops manager?
I'm sorry?
And that's with every employee from the cleaning staff to the ops
For
manager?
the debrief, for the crisis response, when we are there on the campus, yes, anyone who needs to process or to speak with the counselor, they're available to everyone.
It's like the cleaning staff, nobody would really
Mhm.
think, but they're usually the ones that go in and have to
Yep,
clean up.
agreed.
All right, well, our last slide before we kind of open it up for any final questions is just an update on a formal safety audit cycle. So legislation requires that. They kind of just shifted it to charters, but districts have been on a 3-year cycle where each of their campuses has to go through a formal kind of district, or rather state-approved audit cycle, just to do a deep dive on how safe are your schools, really. And so we've partnered with Schools on Target. They've been just great to work with. They are consultants for the Texas School Safety Center, and we had them come at the end of last school year to visit each of our campuses. They spent a couple of days there in some cases, and some they were able to knock it out if it was a smaller campus in a half a day or a day. And talk to administrators, talk to ops directors, review our documents. They do an intruder assessment trying to see if they can gain access, just really looking at everything. And they gave us this really comprehensive report. And so Julie and I are in the process of working through that. And some of it we've already kind of caught some low-hanging fruit, like that makes a lot of sense, and make this adjustment at those campuses. And then other pieces, they kind of gave us a kind of overall network glows and then some recommendations. And so those takeaways, just to share with y'all today, were the glows where they really kind of showed an appreciation for the ops director approach, just, I guess, them being that safety lead at each campus. They were able to very quickly come in, talk safety, see the safety documents. The one person who's coordinating drills and all of those things is that same role at campuses, which it sounds like must not be the case in some other districts. And so,
Well, we know that's not at ISDs, because most of the time at ISD, one of the assistant principals also handles facility
Right.
stuff and ops stuff.
Yep.
At Uplift, we actually have a director, so that is a unique
Yeah.
structure.
And I agree with you, Yasmin. That's one thing that we had a hurdle we had to kind of get through with some of our third-party vendors. They were very comfortable with ISDs and how they worked and their verbiage. And so when they were coming into us, they were looking at us from a completely, they were trying not to be on the biased, ISD side, because that's what they're used to dealing with. And they really came away probably more in awe of how we do things because it was new to them. And they did a wonderful job, and they gave us some, like I said, short-term resolutions that we can fix really quickly. We have some long-terms that we can put into budgets. It was good for, I think, both of us,
Yep.
both them and us, to go through that process.
another piece, the timing of their audit, they got to see the COVID protocols in full effect, and so that was a major shout out to Amy and her team and kind of the partnership that all the campus staff implementing it were able to put into place. So that was a major shout out with the signage and the systems for keeping social distancing working and everything. And then a shout out for the student code of conduct documents. So they, I guess, was very comprehensive and included a lot of the pieces that we have in place that were appreciated by the auditors. Recommendations they shared. One is updating the EOP documents just to meet the new format requirements, which is what we've been doing. And that's kind of where we've learned that they're learning from us just as much as we're kind of learning from them, and as they see what we do as charters. And we did pass the submission, and then now we're just making those final updates for other pieces that new legislation has pushed out with continuity of operations planning and some of those pieces. One recommendation, we've started talking to our building and facilities teams about is just larger campus signage. Some of our buildings do this well, some don't. Probably not as much of an issue at Infinity since it's one big building, but some of our campuses are kind of, really large properties, so making sure there's no question when you're at the primary building or the middle school building or the 6th grade building, and some of those just large, just obvious signage to make it easier to find for emergency personnel, for visitors, all those things, and just to keep that clear. So we're moving toward that as we make building improvements and do preventative maintenance work and those types of things. Another one's just kind of a quick fix. We've already pushed it out, but we're kind of continuing to work to formalize it. Just making sure that in addition to the facilities walks we do when custodians are either picking up trash on the grounds or just walking the campus, making sure there's a very intentional security walk happening throughout the day, double checking the property for anything unusual, checking doors, gates, all those things, just every day. There's a very consistent practice there, so that's one we're also working into. So that's really all the kind of formal information we had for today. We covered a lot of great material as the questions came up, and as we had some conversations throughout. But if there's any other questions, we'd be happy to discuss.
The signage is a sometimes I don't understand how, because in apartment complexes, we do it that all the way, or always, right? This number's here and then it completely changes.
Right.
I used to deliver pizzas, I know that well.
So, like North Hills, the only thing that makes you know where the office may or may not be at North Hills is the flags. But you got to be observant to know, to see the flags, right?
Right.
So, because they have numerous buildings on that campus, so I think that would be good to have that signage. Because I know I've gotten those questions, because everybody in the department knows my relationship with y'all, so anytime they get dispatched to a call, a lot of times they're calling me, hey, they're saying I go to the gym, or which gym is it there? Because North Hills has 2 gyms, right? So, so they're trying to figure out which one it is, so I think that signage that can only help. But you gotta make it pretty.
Do you, just asking, is there like maps, like ISDs that have implemented this? Do they send them to the local police, so they have something on file that shows the campus with all the signage, and
so
is that something that we should do?
I would say yes, go ahead and be proactive in doing it.
Okay.
When I was on SWAT and we were having a bunch of different things with the school campuses, we went to every single school within the city of Irving and got their maps and put them in our folder that is carried in the commanders, the lieutenant over the SWAT team. He carries that, and the 2 sergeants carry that, and their actual Tahoes, so that when they respond to something, we can pull out that map or pull it up on a computer, and because they have dry erase boards when we start drawing out plans in the back of our Tahoes to be able to start going in.
Okay.
But that's a very good point, and it's a very critical one that, a lot of times the fire department gets that stuff.
Right.
But the fire department and police are completely
Right.
separate, right? And,
I'm finding that out.
Yeah, 100% completely separate. And so even to the point to where the computers that they put in our cars, for some reason they have much better maps and they know exactly which apartment they're going to in that apartment complex.
Right.
But ours are like, it's just in the area. We just have the address, and we're always trying to find it either with the spotlight in the nighttime or with the flashlight, or actually during the daytime. So maps are very beneficial. Definitely where the main offices are, everything like that. It can only help.
Okay.
Well, terrific. Thank you so much, Officer Reeves. Heartfelt thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, the 15+ years of partnership. I know every time we chat, there's always something new that I learn, and this is really terrific. Over the years, it's always been great working with the community. You learn little bits of information, that you can only better the process. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, thank you to all of the presenters this morning. It takes some time to put everything together, and being here, and very much appreciate it. And with that, unless there is any other business,
Sorry, Alex, I know I'm the talker, but
no, go ahead.
So network-wide, is it lockdown, lockout, secure, and shelter?
Yes. So we're shifting to the language, We
That
have some,
language shift, yeah.
yeah, we're making that language shift just based on the Texas School Safety Center training.
Right, okay. And something when that occurs, or for the next school year, something that the ISDs I know have done is each classroom has that laminated by their door. So it's always, whether you're reading it or not reading it each time you're walking by it, it's subconsciously getting into, you know, because you do your drills, you just have to do two, right? One lockdown,
Right.
which is the full one, and then a really soft one. And so 2 times in 10 months isn't, I mean,
You're not gonna get muscle memory. Yeah.
so the trainings are
That's a
good.
really good idea.
But they definitely do not make everybody trained, right? So having those little subliminal reminders are.
Great idea.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a great
Can't wait to
idea.
put that in place.
It's just like we did our COVID protocols in every classroom.
Right.
Right.
Kind of poster up.
Terrific. Well, again, thanks to everyone for being here. It is 9:57, and we will adjourn this meeting.